That's the interesting thing when you look at a tornado. The rating of a tornado is based on the damage that it leaves behind. And so what they found was the damage was consistent with an EF1 tornado. So the winds were rated at 90 miles an hour, touched down right around 7:02 p.m. You can see the location on the map. This red line is showing exactly or a really good approximation of the track that this tornado took. Now, they don't certainly take perfectly straight lines, but this is essentially the track that this took, and then worked its way on pretty much by the north-northeasterly track, and then ended right around 7:10. So just over a 2-mile path of damage with this. And at one point, the maximum width of this was about 100 yards. And we saw wide variety of damage. I mean, we saw some areas with just some minor tree limb damage. And then we actually had some buildings essentially knocked off their foundation. So some really extensive damage. And this was a really quick spin up. Just the way that this spun up, it really difficult to pick out on radar. And it happened so quickly that about the time that any warning would have gone out, this was done. And this is actually very typical of what we see here in Florida, especially this time of the year, where we talk about this many times, that any one of these afternoon thunderstorms can create a quick spin up tornado. And here is a perfect example of that, because they happen so fast that it's really hard to actually pick one of these out and react to it quickly enough. And just all the right circumstances came together with many of these storms developing, and you have the sea breezes and then the outflow boundaries, and on just enough of these boundaries came together, colliding just right, that we got that spin in the atmosphere. And that's what really led to this tornado. So looking at that scale, we're certainly on the lower end of that scale. Remember, those winds I said were 90 miles an hour. And so you see that just making it really into that EF1 rating. And you see how high that scale goes. You've seen these videos of those EF4s and F5s across the Midwest. So those are those extremely damaging tornadoes. Certainly we don't want to see anything like that anywhere, but those are typically not the type that we're going to see, and certainly not going to see something like that in an afternoon storm. Typically in Florida, this time of the year, what we're looking at from these afternoon thunderstorms is the EF0s and the EF1 types of events. So here's a look at some of the damage. Skyfox flew over Largo yesterday, getting a bird's eye view of some of the damage. And there you see it, some of it just some minor roof damage. There you see that, look at that one right there. House essentially knocked right off of its foundation. That was the one that I believe that was essentially lifted up. That one right there, that was that mobile home that was basically essentially lifted right off the foundation, somewhat tipped right on its side, and then dropped back down. And again, you see more of these with some fairly extensive damage, and then others not as much. And it's always interesting to see these, because you notice you're seeing some just with major damage, and then the house next door untouched, completely fine. And that is very typical of tornado damage. So that's all said and done. Unfortunately, many folks in this area having to deal with the cleanup. Now we are talking about a little problem with one camera there in Arcadia, but the others, we're starting to see those darkening skies, where we are seeing more of those storms inland, and then along the coastal areas, things are looking really nice. Here's Clearwater Beach. Had a lot of clouds and some showers along the coastline this morning, but everything's clearing out and things are looking really nice out there right now. Visible satellite loop, you can see that pattern has really changed. Last several days, we've looked at more of that east and southeasterly wind just working its way right over the state in a fashion more like this. And then that sea breeze along the west coast is pinned right along the coastline, and that's what's led to all these storms just firing off right along the coastline as we get into the late afternoon. Now that pattern has changed, and what we have going on right now is those winds coming more from that southwesterly direction, and that is leading to some of these coastal showers, midday showers for us. And then all the activity is starting to shift more inland. Now, if you look real closely here, you do still see that east breeze working its way in. Here, let's go ahead and put an arrow on here showing you where that breeze is. And it looks like it's right about here. And so you've got this breeze coming from the east. You have the winds coming from the west, basically right in that zone. And what's going to happen is these are going to start to come together. And I imagine probably about 90 minutes or so, right where you see that curvy yellow line that I've drawn, we're going to see things starting to really come together in that area. And that's where I expect to see some of those much bigger thunderstorms erupting here as we get to, say, right around 4:30, 5 o'clock this afternoon. So if you're in Polk County, into, say, Highlands County, I think you're going to see some pretty big storms, or at least there's that potential. You're going to see that as we go through late this afternoon. Then the trend will be a lot of this to work its way towards the East Coast. Right now, what you're looking at is that upper level low, which we've been talking about this for several days now, working its way over the state. That really helped to enhance those storms that we saw over us on Wednesday. Now that is lifted to the north. That is also what is helping to switch these winds around and switch that pattern around. And then you see that severe risk. Last couple of days, we've had that marginal painted more over the western side of the state. But now that we flipped that pattern around, you see where it's at? It's painted more over the eastern side of the state. Here's SkyTower radar right now, and we do have some storms around. You can see over into eastern Hillsborough County, we've got some pretty good storms developing right now. Most of this activity, though, it's east of I-75. We've got a couple down towards Ruskin, but then as you head over right along that boundary of Hillsborough County, moving into Polk County, right through here, that's where you're starting to see more of these storms getting a little bit stronger. So some of this activity, that's going to be sliding up towards Bartow. You can see some of these other storms down towards Fort Meade as well. And all this activity is now starting to slide on towards the north and the east. So if you're in places like Lakeland, over towards Winter Haven, over towards Lake Wales, you've got these storms basically heading in your direction here as we go through the next little bit. Probably over the next, say, half an hour or so. And then over towards Polk City, you see a couple of showers. And back over Hillsborough County is just some light showers moving through Carrollwood over into northeastern Hillsborough, because most of these areas along the west coast, those are starting to clear out. We're starting to really focus more of that energy, more of the attention into those inland areas. Up towards Brooksville, north and east of Brooksville, we've got some storms that are rolling through there. There you see they're working their way between Brooksville and I-75. Those will be working their way over into Sumter County. But as you look on towards the east, you're seeing a lot more of this activity already starting to develop over on the eastern side of the state. And that's where you're seeing, say over towards just to the south of Titusville, between Titusville and Satellite Beach. You're seeing some pretty strong storms in that area. And then here's the Florida Turnpike. So right along the Florida Turnpike, moving through Osceola County, then heading all the way down towards Fort Pierce. You have some pretty strong storms in that area. So that's where we're going to see a lot more of these storms focusing as we go through the rest of the afternoon, central part of the state, and then over onto the eastern side of the state. Look at that right now, because of some of the showers that we had earlier and some of the cloud cover that we've had, that temperature here in Tampa, we're only sitting at 88 degrees. I've seen it as high as 89 degrees. So helping to cool things down and helping to moderate some of those temperatures when you get some of these showers a little bit earlier on in the day. Brandon, you're at 91 degrees. Lakeland currently sits at 90. Sarasota currently at 87 degrees. We've seen a lot of storms up towards Tallahassee. That has really cooled things down, 73 degrees. But the flip side of that, Gainesville, it's dry. It is currently sitting at 91 degrees. Dew point numbers still way up to scale there. Very humid everywhere you go across the state, especially, look at that, down across South Florida. You're seeing that dew point in Miami, 77. Down through the Keys, 79 to 80 for that dew point. Very, very sultry air. That's why you see those heat indices, or that feels like temperature down across the Keys, sitting right at 103 degrees. Definitely a steamy one down across the southern end of the state. So watch the Fox model as we continue through the afternoon. You see what's happening? Everything's shifting eastward, pushing along that I-95 corridor. Now, what we're going to watch is as we head into tonight, Fox model indicating maybe we see some of these outflow boundaries. Maybe we see some of these showers trying to work their way back towards the west coast somewhat. So do we get a few showers late tonight along the more towards the western side of the state? Well, there's certainly a possibility. We also will be watching for maybe some of these coastal showers or some rain developing out over the water, and that may lead to at least a few coastal showers through the overnight hours, or at least early tomorrow. And then we hold on to that trend as we head into tomorrow. Here we are tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock, seeing those showers and storms developing. Same kind of an idea as we have today into tomorrow. And we're going to hold this in the next week, where a lot of the activity is going to start to favor those inland locations away from the immediate west coast and then pushing over onto the other side of the state. So plenty of moisture still around the state. It's just a matter of changing the timing of those storms, because we're starting to shift everything away from the west coast and shift it more onto the eastern side of the state. Remember, early in the week, it was that big heat dome that is breaking down. Now you look across Tennessee and into the Carolinas, and yeah, you're finally starting to see some of these showers are helping to cool things down. Up across the Northeast earlier this week, triple digits for these daytime highs. Now look at that. New York City, it's like fall, 72 degrees. Washington, D.C. currently sits at 70 degrees, so the heat is gone for them. Columbus still on the hot side, though, still on that southern side of that front, so still sitting at 90 degrees. Now, as we go through the next 7 days, through the weekend, switching that pattern around, those storms are going to come earlier on. We'll see that rain chance right around 40 to 50%. A bit higher as you're, say, east of I-75. So if you're in Polk County, you're looking at more of that 50 to 60% chance of those storms as we go through the weekend and into next week. So coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're talking the tropics, because we have one area that we're now watching in the Caribbean. We'll have the latest on that coming up in just a couple of minutes. Welcome back to SkyTower Weather Now, looking at that big wide view over the tropical Atlantic. And this has been a common theme where we're talking about all the dry Saharan dust working its way across the Atlantic, and still watching a lot of that. And you notice we have some of this down over at least portions of the Caribbean, down over the Bahamas and South Florida as well. But if you look closely, we've got this one area that we've been watching down across the Western Caribbean. I mentioned this yesterday, just a very disorganized area of convection. This has now worked its way, at least the center of this broad circulation has now worked its way over the Yucatan, and the Hurricane Center now highlighting this area for the possibility of some development. Now, we're not talking about development as it's sitting there right now. It's not going to develop over land, although you do see some convection very close to the center that they have highlighted right through here. But what you're going to be watching is, as we go into tomorrow, heading through the weekend, what we're really talking about is as this moves back out over water, conditions do look like they're at least going to be somewhat conducive that we could see some development. Now, you do see, if you look closely, you can still see maybe some stronger winds right through here. You see some of these clouds racing on towards the north and the east a little bit. That gives you an idea. There's some wind shear in there, but conditions will be changing, and we will start to see conditions becoming a bit more conducive down across the southern Gulf. That's down into the Bay of Campeche. And so hurricane reconnaissance plane, they're scheduled to fly out into this tomorrow. And what partly they're looking at is, hey, when this is arriving, what kind of conditions do we have down here to see how conducive is the environment for development, and then they'll start to sample this to see exactly what's going on. So we'll kind of keep you posted on this as we go through the weekend. But right now, Hurricane Center still keeping the odds pretty low, 20-30% chance over the next 2 to 7 days. Now, this whole event is certainly not going to last 7 days. We're talking more along the lines of, say, 3 days. So it's going to have this time over water. If it doesn't happen, regardless whether it happens or not, it's eventually going to work its way back over land and into Mexico. So you look at some of that spin in the atmosphere, and what you do see, we are getting, we're picking up on some of that spin, that atmospheric spin, and then working its way back out over water. But you're certainly, at least with the European here at this point, not picking up on a really definite circulation, that low-level circulation on this. It does look like it stays more of a broad circulation, but there is that potential. That's why we're going to watch this really closely. The Fox model showing the winds again in these areas, and you're not seeing anything all that substantial. So at this point, does look like the chances that they've put on this 20 to 30% certainly makes sense. Keeping that on that really low end of possibility of development. Now, in the Pacific, this is that other area. We've been talking about this for several days now, that Invest 95. You're seeing that big flare up of convection with this, but this is still a fairly disorganized system at this point. But right now we're seeing those beginning stages. We're seeing those persistent areas of convection. About the time we see some of this starting to wane, we see other areas starting to fire up. So this definitely starting to look like a system that is trying to get itself organized and trying to develop. So Hurricane Center is now up this to about a 60% chance of development, 90% over the next 7 days. So as you look at some of the various computer models, the European AI model, and then on the GFS, at this point, you're still seeing that fairly broad area of low pressure with this. That's what you're seeing with each one of these areas right through here. Now watch as we can go through time, and you're starting to see more and more signs of that circulation, or at least that area of low pressure right there. We're seeing that, and then it will continue to work its way on towards the north and the west. At this point, it does look like it will basically be paralleling the coastline, working its way in that general direction, staying enough offshore, and so it really limits those land interactions, and then continues to show more signs of development as we go into the first part of next week and heading towards about the middle of next week. So this does look like it's got all the hallmarks that this is going to become our next tropical system in the Pacific. Next name on the list, by the way, it's Flossie for the Pacific. Here's the AI European model showing those winds picking up. So Cabo may have to watch this as we head into the middle of next week. Now, another thing we've been watching very closely is that Saharan dust. That's a big part of what is keeping things quiet right now, because we've got a lot of that strong wind shear. But you look across South Florida over the Bahamas, and we do have some of that around. So that will actually play in part with some of the, at least limiting some of the rain chances, especially across South Florida, I think, as we go through the weekend. But you notice a lot of that just tends to thin out some as it gets over Central Florida. So coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to talk more about our own local forecast. We'll talk about the weekend forecast, and we'll have more views of SkyTower radar. Downtown Sarasota, looking at those storms off in the distance. Had some earlier on, leftover clouds, and definitely some dark skies out there right now. And then here's another view along the coastline. The beaches there looking really nice. St. Pete Beach, nice blue skies, all the coastal areas clearing out really nicely with everything working its way away from the coastline. You know what? We've got a severe thunderstorm warning here that looks like it's just popped up. So let's jump over and look at the radar. You may have heard some of the alarms going off here in the weather office. And here we go. Let's zoom in to Polk County right now. This has just come out. I mean, you heard the alarms there as we were talking. And this is that severe thunderstorm warning now in effect for Polk County. This goes until 4 o'clock. And you can see the areas that we are looking at right now. This is basically Eaton Park, Lakeland Highlands, and then moving on to the east of Lakeland right now. Pretty strong storm in this area, quite a bit of lightning as well, but this is for some of the gusty winds coming out of this 50 to 60 mile an hour wind gust with this. Let's go ahead and look over, and what we're seeing here is when 60 miles an hour with this, estimated by radar. This is moving on towards the northeast right now at about 20 miles an hour. So if you're in this area, you want to really pay attention. This is in Polk County. This is now currently sitting to the south of Lakeland, but this is moving to the northeast at 20 miles an hour. So it's been working its way over Mulberry, and then you have that basically right here is I-4, and then the turnpike or the loop that goes to just to the south and around Lakeland, right near Eaton Park, so 570, the Polk Parkway, and then wraps around over towards Auburndale. So if you're up towards Auburndale, some of that will be heading in your direction as well. You have to watch this very closely. Again, this is a severe thunderstorm warning in Polk County that goes until 4 o'clock. So what we have about another 32 minutes of this. So Auburndale over towards Winter Haven, right along that Polk Parkway, south and east of Lakeland. This cell is heading in your direction right now. Go ahead and let's throw on the lightning counter here. You can see over 300 strokes of lightning with this cell that is working its way currently through Polk County. Let's take a look at some of the other aspects of this right now, just to see if we have any winds in this that we have to be concerned about. And right now you do see, we're actually seeing some of these stronger, it looks like straight line winds here, but we are seeing some winds up aloft gusting up to about 40 miles an hour. So definitely some stronger winds that are coming now out of this thunderstorm in this area. And maybe we're seeing a little bit of rotation in some of this right now, some strong gusty winds. So we're going to certainly be watching for that possibility of a tornado with this. But at this point, we again have that severe thunderstorm warning that goes until 4 o'clock for Polk County. Join us next time on SkyTower. Thanks for tuning in to SkyTower Weather Now. I'm meteorologist Jim Weber, and boy, what a week we have had. It seems like we've been all over the place. Earlier this week, we were talking about the big heat dome. We've had the big thunderstorms that rolled through this week. Late into the afternoon, into the evening hours. Wednesday, we had the tornado and all the hail reports across Pinellas County up into western Pasco with some of those hail reports, and really an active week. And then just in time as you're getting used to that timing of the storms, seeing them each and every afternoon, heading home from work, and maybe you're heading out for dinner, and you expect to see the big thunderstorms rolling through the area. Well, we've changed the pattern all around. And today, storms have been coming earlier on. They're working their way in a different direction. And we're going to hold on to this pattern at least for a little while. But looking back this week, the tornado, National Weather Service went out and they do their survey to find out much more detail about exactly what happened, what kind of damage. That's the interesting thing when you look at a tornado. The rating of a tornado is based on the damage that it leaves behind. And so what they found was the damage was consistent with an EF1 tornado. So the winds were rated at 90 miles an hour, touchdown right around 7:02 p.m. You can see the location on the map. This red line is showing exactly or a really good approximation of the track that this tornado took. Now, they don't certainly take perfectly straight lines, but this is essentially the track that this took, and then worked its way on pretty much by the north-northeasterly track, and then ended right around 7:10. So just over a 2-mile path of damage with this. And at one point, the maximum width of this was about 100 yards. And we saw wide variety of damage. I mean, we saw some areas with just some minor tree limb damage. And then we actually had some buildings essentially knocked off their foundation. So some really extensive damage. And this was a really quick spin up. Just the way that this spun up, it really difficult to pick out on radar, and it happened so quickly that about the time that any warning would have gone out, this was done. And this is actually very typical of what we see here in Florida, especially this time of the year, where we talk about this many times, that any one of these afternoon thunderstorms can create a quick spin up tornado. And here is a perfect example of that, because they happen so fast that it's really hard to actually pick one of these out and react to it quickly enough. And just all the right circumstances came together with many of these storms developing, and you have the sea breezes and then the outflow boundaries, and just enough of these boundaries came together, colliding just right, that we got that spin in the atmosphere. And that's what really led to this tornado. So looking at that scale, we're certainly on the lower end of that scale. Remember, those winds I said were 90 miles an hour. And so you see that just making it really into that EF1 rating. And you see how high that scale goes. You've seen these videos of those EF4s and EF5s across the Midwest. So those are those extremely damaging tornadoes. Certainly we don't want to see anything like that anywhere, but those are typically not the type that we're going to see, and certainly not going to see something like that in an afternoon storm. Typically in Florida, this time of the year, what we're looking at from these afternoon thunderstorms is the EF0s and the EF1 types of events. So here's a look at some of the damage. Skyfox flew over Largo yesterday, getting a bird's eye view of some of the damage. And there you see it, some of it just some minor roof damage. There you see that, look at that one right there. House essentially knocked right off of its foundation. That was the one that I believe that was essentially lifted up. That one right there. That was that mobile home that was basically essentially lifted right off the foundation.